Picture the moment. It is somewhere between 50 and 100,000 years ago. A small group of humans is gathered around a body. One of their own has stopped moving. The breathing is gone. The warmth is fading. And for the first time in the history of life on this planet, a creature looks down at another dead creature and asks a question that no animal had ever asked before. Where did they go? That question changed everything. It did not start with temples. It did not start with priests or scriptures or organized religion. It started with a single devastating cognitive moment. The moment a human brain, newly capable of imagining things that were not physically present, pointed itself at death and refused to accept that the story simply ended. That refusal is the seed of every god ever worshipped, every prayer ever spoken, every altar ever built. But why did it happen? And why did it happen to us? To understand the origin of belief, you have to understand what makes the human brain structurally different from every other brain on the planet. Cognitive scientist Pascal Boyer, whose research into the origins of religion became foundational in the field, identified something he called the hyperactive agency detection device. It is a mental tendency, baked deep into your neural architecture, to assume that things which happen have a cause. Not just a physical cause, a minded cause, an intentional cause, something or someone who meant to do it. This was not an accident of evolution, it was a survival feature. Imagine your ancestors standing in tall grass. There is a rustle. Your ancestor's brain has two options. Option 1, assume it is just the wind and stay calm. Option 2, assume it is a predator and run. If it was the wind and they ran, they wasted energy. If it was a predator and they stayed calm, they died. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the brains that survived were the ones that defaulted to option 2. The ones that saw intention everywhere. The ones that assumed an agent behind every event. You inherited that brain. And here is where it gets interesting. That same brain, when it turned toward the night sky and saw lightning strike and kill a person, did not think random electrical discharge. It thought someone did that. When the river flooded and destroyed the camp, it did not think meteorological event. It thought something is angry. When the hunt went perfectly after days of failure, it did not think probability. It thought something helped us. This is what anthropologist Stuart Guthrie called the perception of faces in clouds. Humans are so wired to detect minds behind events that they project minds onto everything. Thunder, fire, rivers, mountains, animals, the dead, especially the dead. Archaeologist David Lewis Williams, who spent decades studying the oldest known human symbolic behavior, found evidence that the very first spiritual beliefs were not about gods in the sky. They were about the dead remaining present. Cave paintings in South Africa dating back over 70,000 years show figures that appear to move between worlds. Early burial sites show bodies placed with food, tools, and ochre, as if the person was being sent somewhere, as if the journey was continuing. Your ancestors did not experience death as an ending. They experienced it as a transition to somewhere the living could not see. And once you believe the dead are still present, something powerful follows. If they are still there, can they hear you? Can they help you? Can they hurt you? Can you speak to them? Can certain people speak to them more clearly than others? The shaman, the priest, the oracle, every intermediary between the living and the unseen world traces a direct line back to that original belief, that the dead did not leave. They just moved. But ancestral spirits were only the beginning. As human groups grew larger and more complex, something shifted in the nature of belief itself. Cognitive anthropologist Harvey Whitehouse, whose research into religious ritual has spanned decades across multiple continents, identified a pattern that appears across every known culture independently. Small groups tend toward personal, intimate spiritual relationships with ancestors, with local spirits, with the specific land they inhabit. But as groups scale up, belief scales up with them. Local spirits become regional gods. Regional gods become universal ones. The divine mirrors the social structure of the people imagining it. 10,000 years ago, when the first farming settlements began to emerge, the gods changed. They became bigger, more demanding, more abstract. A god of the hunt made sense when you were tracking animals through a forest you had known your entire life. But a god of the harvest, of the flood, of the sun that determined whether your crops lived or died, that god had to be vast, had to be powerful in a way that matched the new scale of human vulnerability. The first cities were not just political structures, they were theological ones. Every ancient city was built around a temple. Every early king was either a god or a god's representative on earth. Power and belief were not separate categories. They were the same category. To control the narrative of why things happened was to control everything. And here is the part that cuts closest to the present. Neuroscientist Andrew Newberg, who spent years scanning the brains of people in deep prayer and meditation, found something that should make you pause. The brain during intense religious experience does not look like the brain of someone imagining something. It looks like the brain of someone perceiving something real. The boundaries of the self dissolve. The sense of a presence beyond the self becomes neurologically indistinguishable from actual sensory experience. Whatever you believe about the ultimate nature of that experience, the brain is not faking it. It is doing something profound, something it may have been built to do. Which raises the question that researchers are still arguing about today. Did humans invent gods? Or did humans evolve a brain that was always going to find them? Boyer would say the brain's tendency to detect agents made gods an almost inevitable byproduct of cognition. Guthrie would say we are such compulsive mind readers that we were always going to read minds into the universe itself. Newberg would say the experience of transcendence is so neurologically real that the line between invention and discovery may not be as clear as you think. What none of them dispute is this: belief is not an accident. It is not primitive thinking that smarter people outgrew. It is a feature of the most cognitively sophisticated brain that has ever existed on this planet. A brain that can model other minds, project consciousness outward, imagine continuity beyond death, and experience something that feels, at the neurological level, like contact with something larger than itself. You are walking around with that brain right now. The moment your ancestor looked down at the body and asked, where did they go? That was not superstition. That was the first act of the most human thing humans have ever done. The refusal to believe that consciousness simply stops. The insistence that there is more to the story. The feeling, persistent and stubborn across every culture in every era on every continent, that something is out there, watching, present, listening. You set that question loose in the world 100,000 years ago. Every temple ever built, every candle ever lit, every prayer whispered in the dark is still trying to answer it.